When are we going to build that special feature? Why can't we get this feature out?
I mean, the question you just asked there, Patrick, is probably like the polite version of actually this, because when are we going to build it, Eli? Like, it's actually like, it's more generally where the F is blah. I thought it was already done. It's like, it's not when are we going to build it, right? You're right. Like, this is this thing we're trying to suss out here, that someone cares about some feature on this thing. I just think the way you framed it, Patrick, was the polite version of it. Like, when are we going to start on that thing, right? Like, it's actually like, no, I want that thing. I want the thing yesterday. So either way, we're trying to suss that thing out. I think in a dimension we could pull on this, though, is that like, two things to think about. Like, one, this is a little bit around projecting roadmap and like when are things actually coming along in this stuff. I actually think it's also, there's stuff around here on providing transparency around like how long it takes to get things done, and like which like and what's the sequence on that part of it. So like I'm cheating here, I'm jumping in here right on this part of it, but I think like the question is like, why isn't this done, or when are we going to start that? They're all permutations of I want something, right? And very low understanding of like how long it's going to take, like what's the pathway on there, how do I know it's actually making progress on those things. And Eli knows I harp on this all day long. It's like literally like it's don't just say we're working on blah, tell me if we're like 30% of the way through, 60% of the way through, like, or when are we going to get to it? It's not that we're going to get to it, is that we're going to get to it in like a month, get it in 2. And I think I don't want to like pick on Eli on this one, but like I think engineering like teams and engineering leaders traditionally struggle with it. Like, I can't tell you if it's like 30% or 35%, or because like we don't know. We actually don't know. This thing could blossom into like, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 2 days, it could be 20%, it could be like 77%. I don't know, right? And so I actually think this is an ism that actually is busted with the engineering mentality, which is we're so fixated on a like perfection of the answer. It's like that's not what the business is asking for, right? Like, if the head of sales is going to guess, it's going to be 0 or 100%. So like you could do better than that, right? Like like no, even if you're going to be wrong, you can do better. So just tell me we're 20% and tell me we're 2 of 5 on the way there, right? Like and try to like.
So I think the scar tissue that a lot of engineering leaders have on this one, though, is being held to. You said this was going to be done on April 17th.
You're effed.
What the hell?
You're effed either way, though, right? Like, because if you don't say this thing, I'm going to make up a thing and not even tell you about it, right? Like, right? So like, you're better actually controlling your destiny at the risk of your scar tissue, right? Like, it just is like because like thematically, my take on this. If you don't drive the agenda, it will be done for you. Period. That is a big old Andrew like role part of this. Like, if you don't tell the story and you don't actually drive the narrative on this thing, someone else in some finance, business, sales thing will make up the story for you, and you'll be held to a thing you don't even know you're held to, right? And like it's better for you to actually it's better for everyone if you at least can actually grab the bull by the horns and try to actually negotiate the complexities of that statement, right? Agreed with you, Eli, that like, yeah,
no,
April 17th, I want that
with
done.
all that said, I actually think the real solution to this, I mean, and again, these conversations come up sometimes no matter what, but the ideal solution to this is that if you can get in a rhythm where there are predictable units of stuff coming quickly through the chute. If Andrew is being impressed by, oh yeah, there's lots of new stuff popping out all the time, and it seems like whenever we want a thing, new things show up, like these kinds of questions are much less likely to arise than if they are in a world where it's like we're, winding up and taking a giant swing at something over weeks and months, and then like maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, and now we're back to square zero. Like that's the place. That environment is the one where these questions wind up being much more heavy, in my experience.
For what it's worth, I liked your middle statement around sending out more stuff on a regular basis better than I did around building a system that builds units of work. Like, in the sense that I know you meant the same thing, but like there's a trap there around the Unix work statement that I think is a dangerous trap, because if you sound clipped and misinterpreted what you just said there, it'd be like, great, I've been an agile machine, I build 16 story points every week, like victorious, we've now actually done this. And I actually think that is a complete failing on this thing, because I actually think that agile is like really important for the team. It actually is like, I think we like continuous reassessment is great, but it is not sufficient for working with businesses in this way, right? Like it's this thing. It's like you've seen this. We're like, declare victory. We have a story point machine. We do this many stories every whatever. I promise you, the business is not like satisfied with that, because those aren't in business like units that they actually get. Like the like, who cares a 16 story point? Like it doesn't help me sell more. It doesn't help me renew better. It doesn't help me get the fundraising done. Right? Like it's
Well, yeah,
like
that's where unpacking that like what are the units coming down the assembly line. If it's random units of parts that may or may not fit together in any useful way or accomplish anything, that's of no use to anybody. If the units are things that actually deliver value and do something useful for the business and have outcomes that matter, that like getting those reliably and regularly is what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. And I think this is the act of sussing them out. Like what are those units? What is the granularity and how to do this? And by the way, the product team is your friend on this, right? That's their job on this. But also that like to know when there are macro things that are like, as much as we don't love them, that are big and hunky and need to be delivered by a certain date. Like there's plenty of things that we do in the world that require lots of planning, like marketing launches, partnered like things, customers waiting on things that are, as much as we don't love them, are discrete and large, and that actually have to be hit like with a conclusion, and are ill tolerant of the subjectivity of like, there's bits coming through, right? Thing. It actually has to be done in that way. And I think part of this is suss out which one of these things that we're sitting on these things. Like, is the question, hey, when is blah coming out? Just an impatience of I just want more stuff, or is blah like really linchpin, right? Like, because it could be both.
And some of this gets to, in this relationship, building the vocabulary around these things so that you can disambiguate which of those you mean, and know like maybe normally you're optimizing for throughput of lots of stuff, but then sometimes you need to like, no, this particular one really needs to be at that particular place at a particular time, even if that means we're not maximally efficient in throughput for someone. Just knowing which mode you're in and having the language to talk about which thing you're doing when, I think is.
I'm gonna throw one more lens of complexity in here, because like there's one more coded possibility in here that could be happening here, which is it's a second order question, which is this engineering team going to help me in the future? Like, in the sense that, like, it's possible the said business is waiting for something that clearly is not a dependency on today, but it might be a dependency on, like, a year from now or something like that. And the business, the CEO, the head of sales, has now realized it's a big thing. They assume it's a big thing. And Eli, they're kind of testing you to see when you're going to start it, to see like, are we ever going to get there? Like they're actually like asking you about a feature and when you're going to start it, or when it's going to be done, or all these things, not because they actually need it for today. They're actually trying to ask themselves, being like, is this a team that's going to get me there in a year? Because they keep deferring these things that I care about as we'll do it later, but later never comes. I never see if they're actually ever starting it. So I want to see if they start it to actually prove my later comment, or are they just like constantly just never like they're trying to suss out, is the later promise ever realized, right? And they're worried actually about not today. They're not even worried about a customer sold tomorrow, but they're worried about a year from now. Like, am I going to have what I need then on that part of it? And so that's the other thing that's actually being sussed out here. The third possibility, I think.
One kind of final question to wrap this all up. If you had any like quick tactics on how to learn more about the language of the business or understand the priorities of the business, like is that recommending jumping into meetings and shadowing certain conversations? Is it staying up to date on Jellyfish's blogging content, which is something that I do? Like, what's the tactical way to learn more about the language of the business?
This may sound squishy, but just spend more time both in the field and with the other business leaders on this stuff. Like, what are they thinking about? Like, I think there is like, again, I'm going to fall into my own engineering stereotype. You're like waiting for questions to come to you. Like, I actually think you should just be out there. You should be hanging out with, having dinner with the sales team, like understanding what's actually happening, understand what they're stressed about, like sitting down with the finance team, sitting down with the actual CEO, like what are they working on, right? Because you'll get a better pace of what they're thinking about, where their time's going, and that'll actually lead to a conclusion of understanding what it is they're waiting on, even if they aren't able to articulate it. I know that's a squishy answer, but like, and then there's the explicit part of it, just asking what are our business goals for the year, kind of stuff like that. Like, but I think to me, there's a lot of like I think historically we undervalue the relationship side of things and how like a fusing actually happens when you spend time with people and you build the relationship, understand what they're stressed about, what they're working on, and like you get a lot of subtext of learning in that way, and you build trust too. Um, I know that's a soft answer, but like we're in the queuing up of tips. I'll throw that as a tip. Have more dinner, have more drinks with people.
One concept that I've found important in this area is the first team idea. But just that as an engineering leader who's come up through engineering, it's really easy to think of yourself as an engineer and hang out with the engineers and identify as an engineer, and the business is the business. And I don't really know those people super well. And I think that just as a leader, that's a terrible mistake. And needing to think about yourself as an engineer second or third, but as a peer group of leaders cross functionally doing lots of things first. Yeah, it is a mindset shift that has not always been easy for me. I think a lot of people it's not always easy for. But I think it's important, and it plays into the thing that Andrew's describing too, because it naturally flows into if these are the people you're spending a lot of time with and hanging out with and talking to and problem solving with and doing things. Well, then you just have a better understanding. Because there's if you've got a team of dozens, many engineers working on stuff, there's any number of people who can go in and whatever figure out the architecture for that thing or fix the build system or diagnose that bug or what you like. That's not the thing for you as a leader to be spending your time. And even though those are things that like nerdily I enjoy doing and I have skills in doing them and I probably can, being intentional about spending your time in a different way is, I think,